Now, many people want me to talk about race and history. So if you really want to know, the British Empire did not exist. So what about the Irish Famine? 17th century Renaissance documents say that the people of Ireland were cannibals. I mean, who wrote this and why? And many people talk about race and depopulation. Do you know that the history of depopulation based on your ancestry is actually found in the Bible?
Welcome, David, and thank you so much for sharing more information with us today.
Thank you very much, Raphael. I will try to make this introduction as fast as I can. Now, for example, there was a British Empire. I mean, many of us think it was a British Empire. I mean, they call it the British Empire. This is why I call it the British Empire. Now, many people will want to bring race into it when I turn around and say the British Empire did this, the British Empire did that, and many other things. But I use the title British Empire because that's what they do. So we've got used to it. But the reality is, I'm going to go through this introduction first. The reality is there was no British Empire. The British Empire did not exist. Now I'll go through some things, and then people can think about it themselves. Now, for example, here we have many people who have realized, here it's highlighted if people look at the screen, to make the whole world England. This was the purpose of the British Empire. Or once again, here is another one. During the partition of India, many people have said, I will read it out. It's in highlights. Our primary objective was to make the whole world England. When all those Bengalis died of starvation in the 19th century, it was really for their own good. I mean, some people have said things like this, but what is this? To make the whole world England. Not Scotland, not Wales, not Irish. So there was no British Empire. It was an English Empire. Now, the reason why I don't call it English Empire, or why many historians don't, it's because people will think of, many people will see it as a race, targeting the English because of the many crimes that took place. For example, in Ireland. Yes, for example, in Africa, for example, they called it the English Empire, and in India. Many people think maybe it was out of ignorance, but it wasn't out of ignorance, because the British Empire was actually English, and any Scottish or Irish or Welsh or Dutch or anybody else who was working there, admin or soldiers, I mean, the foreigners all around the world just thought of them as English. So everyone just said, hey, we're English. So even the Scottish newspapers and the press 100 years ago, they called it England or the English Empire in reference to the English state. So it was an English empire. Here is an article from the Journal. Yes, and it's from Ireland. So, and they make it clear, because they're Irish, they don't want any part in this history, especially when there's a lot of crime in this empire. You know, with looting, pillaging, and a lot of savagery and a lot of rape. So they say the British Empire was an English empire, and then they say the current UK is just the remains of it. Yeah, things like this. So I call it the British Empire because historians call it, but some people have wrote in comments, or maybe David is anti-white or something. I'm not. I'm using the official title, according to historians. But if you want, I'll make it clear. It was an English empire. Yes, the English ruled Wales. The English ruled Ireland. Yes, and they took many Irish people as soldiers. So the Irish had no part in it. Of course, the British Empire or the English Empire did many good things, many great things. There's many, many great things. I mean, I think so. But, you know, it's like when many people think I'm talking about color because we spoke about India before, and the Indians are not white. So many people have said maybe he's anti-white because I brought up the crimes of the British or the English Empire. Well, today we'll go through the Irish famine and some of the crimes of the British Empire in Ireland, or the English Empire, as the Irish will call it. They will say it was an English empire. It had nothing to do with the Irish. And also, there's another thing somebody commented saying, hey, when the English Empire took people from Europe to the Americas, they said there was no law there. The people were cannibals, one person commented, and said there were cannibals in North America and South America. I mean, there's a lot of evidence there was cannibalism there in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. It went down. I mean, it's documented, the Sioux, the Cheyenne, and many other tribes. But it doesn't mean that everybody was a cannibal. But if we're going to talk about cannibalism, then during the Second World War, many people in Europe were, involved in cannibalism. It's like here is from Cambridge University Press. People can read these documents in their own time. There was cannibalism took place in Poland during the Second World War, and also it is known that many Japanese troops practiced cannibalism in the 20th century during the Second World War on enemy soldiers and civilians and things like this. So, but cannibalism is a separate subject. I'll have to go through it another time. But there is another serious thing. There are documents from the 17th century which say that the Irish people, or the people of Ireland, were cannibals. I mean, it's recorded in Diodorus Siculus or Strabo, and it says that they were also practiced incest and anything. They were just sleeping around, and they said Ireland is basically an uninhabitable, or it's a country that basically it was like savages. They're saying they say that these documents from the 17th century, they claim, are over 1,000 years old, and they were written by ancient authors, for example, Julius Caesar or Pythias. And it says that the people of Ireland were savages and they were cannibals. They were lawless. There was no law there. So one person commented from a part Irish background and said, hey, when people went to the Americas, it was a lawless land. The people didn't have law and they had cannibals. There's many blogs, many people have argued, Ireland was a lawless country full of savages and cannibals. I mean, a lot of this was written by, by British Empire people, or English Empire people amongst the English. And we'll go through that later on. And unfortunately, that's what they claimed. But the Irish will say, no, we had our law. No, this history is not entirely or exactly true. But anyway, and the thing is, so they will say that they're 1,000 years older, but they appeared in the 17th century. And many historians will say, they were written by the Greeks and the Romans, and there's no way they could have known about Ireland. But Professor Fomenko and other people have pointed out, yes, people could read Anatoly Fomenko's books if they want, that these classical and Greek and Roman texts that they mysteriously found during the Renaissance that were missing for 1,000 years. Imagine if you saying, hey, I found all these books, they're 1,000 years old. Yeah, they're just forgeries from the Renaissance times. Many were in the 16th century and updated in the 17th century and things like this. And many people are even saying, how can we say that these are true documents 1,000 years after the death of the people who allegedly wrote them? And we don't know if these people even existed. Things like this. But the fact of the matter is these documents were being printed by the Vatican related printing presses in the 16th and 17th centuries, which say that the Irish people were savages and they were cannibals and they were sleeping around, involved in incest, and Ireland was basically an uninhabitable or basically dangerous country. Yes, And so the Renaissance lasted in the 17th century. These were Renaissance documents when they rediscovered this history. But people are asking, many people are not stupid, and they're saying, hey, it's clear that they were written at that time in the 16th, 17th century. Yes. And they're saying, hey, what extent is this true? Where did these manuscripts and books go during the Middle Ages? Why were these books lost for 1,000 years, and why were they mysteriously found? Let's say in the Renaissance in 16th and 17th century, they're being printed, yes, by organizations related to the Vatican. And then many people have turned around and said, hey, you know, my race are blue people, my race are green people, my race are orange people, and they're saying they're trying to reduce the population of green people on this earth. Now, what many people don't know is that if you read through the Bible, and the Bible is supposed to be a document that was used, especially during the colonial times, and what you will find is in Psalm 21 verse 10, according to the God of the Bible, it says, even their descendants you will wipe out from the earth, their offspring from the human race. Get rid of them. You will destroy their offspring. You're going to reduce their population and get rid of them. Now here is another example in the book of Kings, 1 Kings chapter 21, where the God of the Bible says, I am going to bring disaster on you. I will wipe out your descendants. I mean, there's many similar stories of the God of the Bible doing this. And if the Bible is really so old, yes, from and talking about stories thousands of years ago, then we can say these stories disappeared. But Professor Fomenko says that these stories are actually talking about what happened during the Middle Ages, and the Middle Ages ended in the Renaissance, and then the Bible was still being updated in the 17th and 18th centuries. Professor Anatoly Fomenko points this out, and I point this out in my books too, and I show examples of this in many of my books. For example, in the book, in my book 33 Degrees, I showed that this prophet Mohammed is mentioned in the Bible, and his followers are mentioned, which doesn't make sense. And they're supposed to be thousands of years ago in the Bible, but then they turn up in the Middle Ages in Arabia. But then many of the stories sound like that they're stories that took place during the Crusades, and they ended around the time of the Renaissance and even continued after that. In fact, Professor Anatoly Fomenko shows a lot of evidence to show that the Prophet Muhammad actually did live in Europe, and the original Muslims were the Europeans. And he's written about this, and he's also written about the Kaaba. I mean, it must have been very important that he's actually written just about the Kaaba. I've just written a book recently, and it shows much evidence that the Prophet Muhammad, he was not from Arabia at all. There is no evidence whatsoever to show that Islam originated from Arabia or the Prophet Muhammad came from Arabia. It's in my new book called The Science of the Kaaba, and it goes through many other things to do with sacred geometry. And Professor Anatoly Fomenko and Gleb Nosovsky, they show that Jesus Christ was basically a professor, a prophet, professor, prophet. The prophets were divine professors, and sacred geometry, the father of sacred geometry, I mean, Gleb Nosovsky points out himself, the father of sacred geometry was actually Jesus Christ himself. And Professor Anatoly Fomenko points out that modern Islam, or what is known as Sunni Islam, has actually carried on many of the things that were found in the old world religion, which is known as original Christianity. We can find a lot of this sacred geometry in the entire system of the Sunni Muslims that is based at the Kaaba in Mecca. More information about that is in my book. This sister I'm talking about is excluding the hadith. When you remove the false history, which is known as hadith in Arabic, when you remove that history, what you're left with is a scientific religion that's based on the sacred geometry. It's basically that you will probably see that the original sacred geometry, or the system that Jesus Christ himself wanted to establish, was re-established by either the Prophet Muhammad or his immediate followers, and this is the system that we see at the Kaaba today. But what is this? Wiping out a group of people or a race of people, wiping out their descendants. Yes, according to these documents in the Bible. What does that have to do with today? I mean, many people have said, hey, there's all these biblical codes. I can see them in many of the events that happen today. Well, have you read the stories? Have you even examined the stories of wiping out this tribe, this people, that people? I mean, the Bible, it's supposed to be allegedly the Word of God. I mean, people should really take another look again. Okay, now let's go back to the British Empire. Oh, I mean, the English Empire. Let's go back to it and let's see a few more details in the English Empire, which is very shocking. Let's take a look at what the great British Prime Minister, or English Prime Minister Winston Churchill, had to say. Many of the elites at that time had many things to say about different people who were not English. Many historians will say, British Empire, British. But realistically, they were talking about English Empire and to make the whole world England. And let's see how they saw people who were not English. And this is just a small example. Many of the other things are actually, people would define them today as very racist, but people can look in their own time and investigate these things themselves. But here is a very good example. In fact, you could read this.
Winston Churchill, why the Anglo-American glorification of this monster must stop.
Okay, let me stop you. Yes, America is not, English, Irish, and Scottish and Welsh. America is an English setup government, English setup state. If anybody watches Last of the Mohicans, I love that movie. Please look for it. Last of the Mohicans. That the policy of the British Empire, it wasn't British. The policy of the English Empire was to make the whole world England. Have you heard of this?
Not in this particular way, no.
Well, basically, that was the policy, and they've succeeded. What is the global language today?
Good point, yes. English?
Is it Irish?
No.
It's English.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's not British, it's English. So it is the English American glorification. So now, Churchill, what do we know about him?
Churchill claimed to be protecting freedom and democracy, and yet he denied the same to people under British rule. He held openly racist views of non-English people and was in favor of the mass slaughter of nations he believed to be coming in the way of the British Empire. He was also the one...
English Empire.
Yes, and he was also the one talking about the Huns, no? The Germans, the Huns.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So now I'll put this in easy words for people. He was openly racist of non-English people, and the mass slaughter basically killed them all, kill their children, make sure they can't have children, sterilization or anything else, if they're going to get in the way of the English Empire. Okay. Are the Irish English? Are the French English?
No.
No. So now, Churchill, now this is very important. Yes, here is his grandmother's family, and his grandmother was an Indian. Now they will try and say maybe she was American Indian or whatever. She was in Indian. So now the thing is, because they don't want a conflict in England, nobody does. But what people say is that Irish people, they're not Protestant, they're Catholics. But they've tried to moderate the history because we don't want conflicts. Now, if we don't have order, it means there's going to be chaos. And if there is chaos, it means that unfortunately people kill each other when problems happen. That is the reality. It starts from protests and then murders. I mean, Ukraine, it was first protests and then it's murders. Yes, but the Ukrainian people, it's been 100 years, but they have never forgiven what the Russian NKVD did. You see, they don't care if they are Ukrainian or Russia in the western side of Ukraine. They can just remember what the NKVD did. Now back to Churchill. Guess what? You won't believe it. He supported the British Eugenics Society, and he was also, you could read here, the vice president honorary for the organisation. And he thought that eugenics, or basically race, and all these things that it could solve to reduce crime and poverty. So imagine right now, if you're one of them criminals, Raphael, yeah, or you did some crime or something. Yes, or you were poor, and to get rid of poverty, basically eugenics meant, sterilize them so that they can't have children, because they thought, you're a criminal, so your children, grandchildren, etc., or basically your entire tribe and people, they're criminals and they're poor or whatever. It's like it's carrying on through the entire tribe or the race. And things like this. And, many people have studied these things. And guess what? At that time, 100 years ago, you could have a look at the English press. They call it the British press, but it was the English press, that was used throughout the English Empire, or what they call the British Empire. You could find these type of stories in America, in Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And basically, they saw the Irish were criminals. They were poor. They were a threat to, they call it here, the social order, or basically the English order. And, eugenics or race deterioration, and etc., and all this racism and all this garbage. So the thing is, many of the English were racist towards the Irish. And in fact, unfortunately, I don't like repeating these words, but there were many notices like no Irish allowed and no dogs. These are the kind of notices they put, and they used to call the Irish black people, even though their colour and appearance is not black. And things like this. So unfortunately, but because of the politics, and you have to remember there was wars going on constantly in the early 20th century. So Churchill, of course, tried to get many Irish who were living in England and in the colonies, or what they called the colonies, Australia, Canada, and even in the US, to join the American or the English army. So, he was trying to show at the same time, he's a politician. What do you expect, Raphael? Yeah, so he's trying to show, hey, that there are brothers, this and that, and they've invented a fake history and things like that to show. For example, they said many Irish people served in the war. I think they said about 50, 60,000, but then they doubled it, 20, 30, 40 years later, because they're trying to reduce the racism. But they were racist against the Irish. And this is very well known, and things like this. And Winston Churchill, of course, he ordered, bomb Ireland, bomb it. Officially, as far as we know, 3 times. And, if you go to Ireland, where they've preserved the history, they're going to tell you these things, just bombing things. And unfortunately, they were burning civilian homes, beating civilians up, things like this. And, throughout the late 19th century and things like this, the Irish were basically seen as a threat, as a threat, throughout, the so-called English or British Empire. Unfortunately, it's a sad history, and hopefully, I hope we don't have to go back towards those times when people had these racist thoughts And when they had these thoughts saying, "Hey, it's in their genes, it's in their genetics. They're criminals. Their children are criminals," and things like this. And we have to sterilize these people, and things like this to make sure they can't have children. Or basically, it's the same as saying murdering their children or murdering their descendants. You know, these type of stories are actually in the Bible. Wipe out the entire tribe. They're seen as a threat, or because of what they did, etc., etc. But anyway, you could read this. Churchill made many statements. There's many people who said this, but you could read this.
Yes.
What basically Churchill believed in. Yeah, and many of his contemporaries, all these upper class English gentlemen. Yes, and what they believed about race. What did they believe?
Views
He
of
held,
Churchill towards race. According to historians,
yeah, go faster from the middle. He held a perspective on race,
right,
believing,
he held a hierarchical perspective on race, believing white Protestant Christians to be at the top of this hierarchy. I guess he was a white Protestant Christian, and white Catholics beneath them, while Indians were higher on this hierarchy than black Africans.
yes. So Churchill, he had Indian blood. And so this is one person's opinion, but whatever the opinions were, yes, many of the English elite, they saw Indians, Pakistanis, and Bangladeshis, yes, to be like high in the hierarchy. And when they say Protestant, they meant Anglo-Saxon or that area, Dutch and English in the south. Not anybody in the north, in the United Kingdom or in the West or the Irish especially. They didn't see them as as basically didn't see them as human. And many of them, there's many books, many statements made by them at the time, many diaries, many things. Many of them died recently in the last 50 years, and they were still screaming with their racist things, what they were saying about many things. But anyway, so many of these Irish came to England, and unfortunately, I'm going to show the reality of the history, and it's not very nice. Yes, it's not nice at all. If anybody sees, they were beaten, they were half naked. Yes, there was cannibalism going on. The history has been removed and things like this. Um, Here is Irish children and things like this. People who are getting off, who are escaping Ireland. The famine lasted for about 50, 60 years. It had something to do with the collapse of Moscow. So now we've got all these people who are coming, and they were getting tortured,
For
beat up.
50, 60 years, you say starvation? Are you serious?
It's that bad, shall I be honest with you? That there were peak years, but the starvation continued because the English were the British. But if I say British, people are going to say, oh, he's labeling the Irish and the Scottish. Yeah, so I don't want to label anybody. It was an English empire. The Welsh didn't set it up. The Welsh elite didn't control it. The Scottish didn't set it up. The Scottish elite didn't control it. The Irish didn't set it up. The Irish elite didn't control it. It was an English empire, and the policy was to make the whole world England. Yes. And so what they did is, when you just look at what's going on, they were beating and torturing these children, get to work. And so now the thing is, there was somebody who turned around and said, oh, the Native American Indians, they were cannibals or this and that. Okay. Yes, let's have a look at what the English Empire did to the Irish. I didn't want to bring this history out because I actually like the Irish. I've got many Irish friends, and it hurts me. I don't want to talk about it. It's that bad. In fact, I didn't even want to talk about what the British did in the Indian subcontinent. I don't like talking about these things because actually it hurts me. How they saw the Irish and Scottish. They're slaves to the English. So now these slave races, and these Catholics, that they're, subhuman races, what the English elite used to call them. Please describe these people, Raphael.
So this is
Because
from
the same,
the
yes,
europanetwork.eu. It says people were consequently commonly found living in holes in the ground and dying or dead by roadsides.
The people who did these things were monsters. They destroyed humans. I don't see the people who were in power who did this as English. I've got English friends. English people are nice. The
Right.
people who were behind it, the English elites, that's why I just say British Empire. I'm not targeting whites or blacks or anything. Now, to make this easy for you, Raphael, I'm just going to explain a few things, yes, very fast. Now, in England, I pointed out to you before, there's about 6 million people of Irish ancestry, and with the mixed marriages and other things, there could be up to 10 million. But anyway, during the Second World War, when the war started in 1939, the Irish Republican Army, they planted several hundred bombs in England, just in England. So they did this, targeting stations, electricity, railway stations, etc., and things like this. So there was a big problem with the Irish people and the English people in England. Yes, when I say the English, I don't mean everybody. I mean the elite and other people who might have been racist. But I'm guessing that the vast majority of English people were gentlemen, they were decent, they were nice people, and they were not racist. I mean, I live in England. I don't see the majority of the English people as being racist, and they're genuinely nice people. But anyway, so now let's have a look at this a bit more. So when you have a look, Irish people are in Australia, and here, if anyone looks at the screen, it shows they were seen as an inferior race. Not only an inferior race, but people saw them in Australia, or the English Australians, many people saw them as having an inferior religion. And, the English elite who ruled Australia 100 years ago saw them as a threat to national security. Basically, they were seen as enemies. But anyway, going on, the thing is, they were thinking when the wars happened, World War One and Two, were these, Irish Australians, Irish Canadians, Irish Americans, Irish who were living in England, are they going to be loyal? Are they loyal citizens? And actually, the reality is, you can see many documents that have been published in Ireland itself. That a huge number of Irish people refused to accept this British identity or English identity. They call it British, but it's really English identity. And many people did take the name Smith, Jones, and other things when they were kidnapped and brought many orphan children here, and things like this. But there was a huge refusal, and they were seen by the English elite as unloyal. Let me make it clear once again. Yes, when I say English, I'm referring to the people in power and anybody who was racist at the time, not the good, nice people of England. Many people were, of course, very nice. Yes, so people have to differentiate between that. Yes, so now we could see the thing is, here is from the Irish Times, the Irish people in English territories or British Empire territories, they were seen as anti-British or anti-English, or therefore anti-Canadian, anti-Australian, anti-American. So, for example, there was rebellions in Australia by groups of Irish people who the English claimed were convicts, yes, who were trying to overthrow English rule, or what they say, British rule. Yes, to overthrow, they were going to get rid of the English government there in Australia and New South Wales. So the English elite of the British Empire, they knew that the Irish were a threat and that they could overthrow, they could cause problems to overthrow English rule in Canada, English rule in America, English rule in Australia, and they could cause many other problems because, of course, they were against the British Empire or against this English Empire. Yes, and this is documented, as you could see, in the National Museum of Australia, rebellion, etc., by Irish people to overthrow the English in New South Wales in Australia. There was conscription campaigns by the English, getting hold of many Irish people, forcing them into the English Empire's army. And so it was always a question of, are they going to be loyal? And they weren't seen as loyal. And so the thing is, the Irish, of course, fought back against the Anglican establishment or the English establishment or the elite establishment, wherever it was in Australia, America, Canada, or England. And for example, they took many of these Irish people as prisoners of war into Australia. It happened throughout the 19th century. And things like this. So they were just kidnapping people. And unfortunately, the hatred carries on today. In some English people who are racist and some Irish people who are racist. But we've got to get past from all the mistakes we made in the past. The purpose of examining history is so that we could build a better world. I mean, how long are we going to carry on this hatred for? Even though some people will use this history and use this nationalism to create hate. The purpose is to learn from these mistakes and to never let it happen again. Yes, because all humans, we're human, we're equal. So now when we look at Australia itself, today there's a lot of Chinese immigrants, Chinese migrants. Yes, and as you can see in the picture there. Yes, but they're Australians. Many of them are born there. And so where are many of them living in areas close to the Irish population? And so the Irish Australians, are trying to restrict the immigration. And many Irish Australians and are advocating for a white Australia. Here we see more immigrants from India. They're Australians, Indian Australians, and they're living there. So, but it's known that many Irish Australians had hatred towards the Chinese. But there's a huge percentage of Chinese and Asian people in Australia. But by the late 19th century, Irish Australians, were 1/3 of Australia's population. Yes, and a major thing, let me just point this out. Yes, everybody knew that the English and the Irish were divided. And you could see this during the First World War, around that time, and all the way through till the end of the Second World War, that there were different communities, and the English elite throughout the empire, from Canada to Australia to England, they saw the Irish as a threat and as unloyal people. Yes, but many Irish, here it's saying it politely in the International Encyclopedia of the First World War, Irish Australians, for example, challenged the appropriateness of their being forced to fight alongside the British or alongside the English. Basically, the Irish said, we're not English, we don't want to fight for the English or with the English. So, one wonders why they would have brought all these migrants who they saw as loyal, because there was many British Indians, Pakistanis and Bangladeshis who fought for the English Empire and things like this. But in England itself, there were in the Irish towns where there's a huge percentage of Irish people, they refused to fight for England. There's all these explosions going off. I mean, bombs. By the Irish Republican Army, and many Irish people in England were involved in this. Yes, and in 1939, when the war started with Germany, England was fighting on two fronts. And so in the northwest and northeast of England, there's many of the Irish families who are working in appalling conditions. Many were brought as children several generations back. But an important thing is they were living in poor areas, inner city areas, in England especially. And 100 years ago, many of them refused to work. And then the English elite, yes, made the law saying that it's illegal for the Irish to refuse to work for the English. Many of them just refused to work because they were kidnapped and brought here. Others knew that, Their land was starving, and why I said it was like 50 years, maybe even up to 100 years, because the food and the produce from the farms was being taken by the English empire, the British Empire. They were just taking it. It was basically theft, and a lot of the organisation was done by the Catholic Church. Yes, and their allies, who was organising all these things, and they made a lot of money out of this. So people were starving. It was like there was the peak years of extreme famine, but throughout the 100 years, it's like hunger and many other things. But they refuse to work. So now we've got many Irish people who are third and fourth generation English. They've got English names. They think they're English. And there's some type of strange attitude in England itself anyway. Yes. And in the UK, of many people who think, I don't want to work, why should I work? And things like this. And people call them scallies and things like this. But unfortunately, if you check through the history of where this originated from, for the refusal to work, it's because, of what happened in Ireland. It's the sad history. Now, we've got to get past this, and we've got to build a better world for the future. People have to see through these things and see through the history and not see it in a negative way. I mean, it wasn't the English people's fault, because a group of the elite and the rich people and all these businessmen and all these other people with the Vatican involvement and the other people who were just making money trafficking people, and they didn't care. Many people were starving and dying and things like this. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, Raphael. I want you to imagine what was going on in England at the time. So in England 100 years ago, about a quarter of the people, up to a third, are probably from Irish ancestry, or from Ireland, or they're Welsh, or they're Scottish, and they're not English, maybe up to half. But also we have to consider all the orphans and the children that they brought from Central Europe, who originated from Eastern Europe and from Southern Europe. So now these people have grown up. They're adults, and then you've got second and third generation. So when they say Irish, we have to remember that when they brought people from Eastern and Central Europe, the land east of Berlin was known as the Russian Empire, or Russia, Irish, Russia. So many people who were known as from Russia or Irish, they took these anglicized English names, and these children, yes, had grown up, and they'd realized, that they're stolen, they're kidnapped, and they were being used as slaves, and they refused to work. Yes, when they grew into adults, or the next generation, they just refused to work as slaves, I mean. Yes, unfortunately, this culture has now carried on, into the second, third, and fourth generations, and many people have forgotten where it started from. And many of these children who have now grown up now actually think that they're English, but they're not actually English, the native people of England. And the people in power, the elite of the British Empire or the English Empire, they know that they're not English. And I want you to imagine the scenario. Now, these people, not only are they refusing to work, but the separatist movements, and in Ireland, and even in Australia, and rebellions in Canada and in America, and the region around Boston and many other places, they could make their own territorial states or their own countries. Same like what happened in Yugoslavia and other places, or movements that we see in Ukraine, or how the Soviet Union collapsed. So the people in power are feeling threatened. Okay, I want you to imagine the reality now, what is going on. And these people, I want you to call them green people, blue people, yellow people, or foreigners. That's how the English elite saw them. And they're having all these rebellions, and they won't listen to the English Empire authorities. And I want you to think what you are planning to do with them. Would you want them to have a high birth rate? It's not a question of if they're white or green or blue, because many people are saying, hey, this is anti-blue or anti-green or anti-white, or this is green genocide or blue genocide or white genocide or orange genocide, and things like this. Many people are saying these things, but I want you to imagine this, and I want you to tell me what you would do if you are the English elite and you are the English or British Empire. I want you to imagine what you're going to do with these people. Yes? So now
And
let's
then
say
they're
you've got cats
planting
and dogs.
bombs under my bed, you mean?
What are you going to do if they're having lots of children? Are you going to let them have a high birth rate?
Well, we can see the de facto situation, which is no.
Uh, uh, just make it clear. Are you
No,
going to
of
let those
course,
cats
that's
and
why
dogs have
pets are
children?
usually being
What are
sterilized and
you?
so on. There's population control being exerted. Definitely, yes.
That's one. And another thing, are you going to encourage them to have more babies and things like this?
Well, only if if I have the room and the food for them.
So now I want you to imagine the reality. All the blue people, the green people, and the orange people. You destroyed their lands, you caused famine, you did a lot of atrocities, rape, murder, torture, for the sake of the English Empire or the British Empire. I want you to tell me what you are going to do. Are you going to encourage them to have a high birth rate? Or what are you going to do? Are you going to bring immigration into their areas, more people, and bring, purple people, or bring red people, or to bring, other people, more blue people, or a different type of green, or sky blue people? What are you going to do with these people? Or what are you going to do in the areas where they're refusing to work and they're having rebellions? And this is only just 50, 60 years ago. And then the culture has persisted, and the future is unknown, and you are the English elite, and you are thinking of your people and your empire, and your policy is to make the whole world England. What are you going to do?
Right, to dilute the population and make them fight each other instead of fighting me, which is the empire. Yes, of
Yes.
course.
So this is what is really going on. Yes, this is what is really going on. It is not a genocide of blue people, not a genocide of red people. It is not anti-green people or anti-white. It is not trying to reduce the birth population of orange people or white people or turquoise people. It is the policy of the English Empire that still exists, and is the policy of to make their empire stronger for their people. Yes, and England is a wonderful and beautiful place today, and it is stronger than the lands that it ruled, many of the lands that it's ruled, not all of them. For example, Hong Kong is a place that, that progressed a lot, but some people will say that, Hong Kong and China would have progressed a lot more if the British weren't there, but that is debatable. Yes, I'm not here for or against the English or the British Empire. I'm just talking history. I'm showing history in the same way that Professor Fomenko shows history and many other people show history. Professor Fomenko does not support Britain. He does not support France. He does not support Germany. He's just talking about the history. In the same way, in case some people are thinking I support blue people or green people. I'm not on either side. I'm just showing in history what happens so that people can realize what is going on and not jump to a conclusion and think, hey, this is genocide or this is anti-blue or this is, genocide against the green people. I mean, we, the green people, can see that you're bringing immigration to wipe out the green population. It is nothing to do with that. Yes, I hope people can see through this a lot more and examine this more. Like, for example, Boston, there was many movements, Irish movements there. And if people have a look clearly around the area around Boston, the immigration and things of what are going on, was this something to do with the genocide against the blue people in Boston? or the red people in Boston, or the green people in Boston, or was this more political? Yes, by the English elite. Because many people are talking about genocide against the green people, but in reality, this is not the case. It is something more political that's to do with history. And if people and the world could move forward and move the politics aside, then we can get rid of the racism. It's because it's not fair that one group of people blames another. Like in Australia, there is a lot of racism against the Chinese or the Asians, thinking, hey, they have done this, they're coming and they're taking over. It's nothing to do with that. Or same like the English were thinking, hey, the Irish have come, they're a threat, and they had these movements, and they could do more things and in the future, and people are worried. But if we remove the politics, we have a beautiful world. The world is a lot better than 100 years ago. I mean, we could make it even more beautiful. I mean, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be a world full of politics, race, religion, and hatred. We could move forward from all these things. I mean, life is beautiful, life is special. I mean, why can't we all just be happy and celebrate the beauty of being green people or blue people? Let's celebrate these things. Yes, instead of looking for things that could incite things and cause problems for no reason, for a history that is gone. Yes, we could talk about the history and learn from it and make the world a better place. Now, about the immigration, I mean, a lot of the immigration recently, anyway, in the last 20, 25 years, a lot of it is because of trade deals. Not only did many of the people, like, let's say, the Moroccans and the Algerians, fight for France, when many people in France said, I don't want to fight for France, I'm just going to go to Canada. Many English people, they left England during the wars and they said, I don't want to fight for England. And many Indians and Pakistanis and Bangladeshis, they fought for England. So the governments rewarded them and brought them as immigration. Not only have they contributed to the economies, but unfortunately, because of the history, many people originally refused to work and there were many problems. So these people came from other countries, and many of them did a lot of the hard work, and they contributed to building Australia or Canada or France or Germany or England or America. And I think that we should all be grateful of these things that the people have done. But anyway, the elite always think of their security as well as the security of the people. But of course, they think about their security also. And they have their intelligence agencies. So if anything that goes wrong, yes, then many people realize that the people in power, they carry out inside jobs. Yes, inside jobs. What many people have noticed, strange events that happen around the world that have mathematical codes. So if these kind of things happen, tell me, Raphael, tell me, let's say if anything happens, yes, what would you do?
I
You
can
see.
I can blame somebody else. I can blame the snakes or whatever I brought in, yeah?
So now
Yes,
you could read this. So,
classic divide
so
and
now,
conquer.
so what happened because of what the British Empire. Yeah, if I say British, then the Scottish and the Welsh and the Irish are going to accuse me. But this English Empire, what was the effects of it in Ireland? Where would you find these Irish people?
Well, again, it says people were consequently commonly found, literally, it says living in holes in the ground and dying or dead by roadsides. I mean, that sounds like a horror movie or something, actually.
No, it was like that in India as well, under English rule. It was like that in America, in the Indian territories under English rule. Before I called it a British Empire, but now I'm giving the reality because some people are going to say I'm targeting race. What am I supposed to do? And invent a new sentence? You know, whatever it was this
Yeah.
empire from London, the elites who are living in the area that is south of Scotland. I will not dare to say the name. I will not dare to say it's called England or English. So now when you go to Ireland, you're going to find thousands of these things. So they're going to give you some bogus history about it. You could read this until the 1900s, basically, until 100 years ago. Thousands of Irish people, what will they say were living in these holes? What would they say?
Until the 1900s, when people in Ireland got sick, they would get naked and disappear into steamy saunas.
That's because the truth is, yes, in Ireland, there was many people who were naked. They didn't have a country of their own. Same like it was like, the Indians. The English can say, you know what the English can't say? And it's true also, because it's true if anybody ever said this. Because somebody commented and said, an Irish person commented and said, oh, um, the Europeans didn't go to America illegally. They couldn't have gone illegally because there was no laws there. They were just cannibal tribes. So wait a minute. The English turned around and said that these people, they were like cannibals. The Irish were. There was no law there. They went there illegally. Come on. It was wrong. It's nothing to do with illegal. It was morally wrong. So now they're saying Irish people used to dig holes and go living in them naked. Basically, they didn't have the materials to make clothes. They didn't have their own economy. The English ran everything. And there were thousands of people who were half naked throughout Ireland, up until 100 years ago. And now, because they want tourists, they'll say, oh, these places were saunas. Does this? Yeah, look at this. They've invented this fake history because, of course, nobody wants to say the sad history. Yes, even I didn't want to talk about this. What do you want me to do? Support the English Empire? Or should I support the Irish? I can't take sides because this was in the past. Now, that's why we've got to build a better future. We've got to get past this. Read this. What are they trying to say here? Until the 1900s, part of the reason
There's crazy theories about hallucinations and making alcohol is because we just don't fully know the truth about sweat houses and all their uses. They are a bit of a
okay, so
riddle
now,
trying to figure out.
yeah, they're basically saying we don't know why there's thousands of holes underground in Ireland, and they're showing the picture of a big hole. So people are going to think, oh no, maybe that's something else. That's a few. But you know what? If you go throughout Ireland, you're going to find thousands of these things, Buster. And so now these ones, and they're trying to tell you people went there to have a sauna. Is that what it looks like to you? Homeless people living in caves,
Yeah.
holes, same like I showed in India and China. Yeah, look at this. They're trying to tell you, oh, people went there just to have a sauna. They were naked there. They found many people that were naked. The people were living in holes. This is what they did. They were terrified of coming out. Their children were getting kidnapped. There's no food. People were starving. And now people are thinking, look at this. They're even making videos of it. The truth is that they're saying we don't know what it is, but you see the same holes in China, in India, yeah, in France, in Germany, in Poland. Ancient sauna. Have you seen this? It just shows how ridiculous people have become.
Hmm.
Yes, this news is just so common that the famines, it started after the collapse of Moscow. There must have been something amazing in Moscow that the entire world went backwards. There was starvation and whatever, and things like this. So here, you could read this. Wait. Let me just point this out. The English perception of the Irish, yes, people can have a look at this, look at the screen. The anti-Irish sentiment by the English in the 19th century, they saw the Irish as bloodthirsty, as cannibals. Yes, this is how they saw them. Now, many of them actually believed it, and it wasn't just believing it. Many people actually said that, hey, this is actually true, that the Irish were actually cannibals. In the same way that there's many Irish Americans or Irish Canadians who say, hey, there was instances and there's evidence for it that the American Indians were cannibals. So there's history that comes both ways. But look at this Charles Kingsley. He's a famous writer from England. And, there's Irish Americans or Irish Canadians who said, oh, when we went to America, the land was lawless. The American Indians had no law. So basically, we didn't invade. You should have a look at this. The English were actually saying they were cannibals, the Irish were. It's a lawless land. And they were barbarians. They were naked or they were half naked. And there's many people who've pointed out, like, for example, Charles Kingsley, the writer from the 19th century, he wrote a letter to his wife in the 1860s, when he went to Ireland. And around that time, Ireland was starving, famine, etc. And I'll read it, what he wrote. But I'm haunted by the human chimpanzees, says Charles Kingsley. I mean, he's calling the Irish people human chimpanzees. Basically, he's calling them animals. Basically, because many of them were like naked or half naked. And I will repeat it. But I am haunted by the human chimpanzees I saw along that hundreds of miles of horrible country. I don't believe they are our fault. So basically, he's saying, hey, whatever was in Ireland wasn't the fault of the English. They're saying it was already like this before we got here. He's saying this, that they were barbarians, they were lawless, they were cannibals, they were animals, basically, before the English arrived. And then he says, well, I will repeat. I am haunted by the human chimpanzees I saw along that 100 miles of horrible country. I don't believe they are our fault. I believe that there are not only more of them than of old, but they are happier, better, more comfortably fed and lodged under our rule than they ever were. So here we have, an example of how the English used to speak. These are the words of Charles Kingsley in the 1860s. He's saying that the Irish were happier under the English, the Irish were better under the English, and they were eating better under the English. That's what he's basically saying. And he's saying that the Irish, they are the human chimpanzees, they're animals. But let's see what else he says. He says, but to see white chimpanzees is dreadful. He's calling them animals, monkeys. A chimpanzee, basically, he's saying, I'm haunted by these, monkeys I saw for hundreds of miles. I don't believe that this is our fault, the starvation, and that they're lawless people, they're cannibals, etc., how the English saw them. So he's saying this is not our fault that they're lawless or they're cannibals and things like this. And he says they're better and we're feeding them under our rule, under English rule, than they ever were. And he said to see these white chimpanzees, white monkeys, is dreadful. And they were basically like, then he says, if they were black, one would not feel it so much, but their skins, except were tanned by exposure, are as white as ours. So here he points out that the Irish were not as white as the English, that many of them actually looked darker. And he says from exposure, maybe they were living out in the sunlight, or because many of them actually had darker skin and things like this, but not black. But he says if they were black, so they weren't black, but he's pointing out that they're white people, but they had a tan, like you could say, like Spanish, Italians, Arabs, Turks, Bulgarians, Greeks, etc., because of the sunshine, like those people along the Mediterranean live in a hotter climate. And many people left Ireland. And when they went to America, of course, they didn't want to be persecuted, like, hey, you're Irish. So many of the people turned around and said, we're Italiano, Española. But they were really from Ireland. But it shows how they thought of the Irish people, human chimpanzees, animals, basically. And many people have commented about these disgusting things that many people were saying. Here is somebody who's commented and says, on the Irish issue, in England we were, I presume still are, taught almost nothing in school of Irish history. I found it gripping, and it explained a lot about the issues continuing to the present day. For example, the chimpanzee or the monkey references are consistent with the sport at one time of Englishmen basically going out hunting local peoples wherever they went, as it happened in Australia. This is another issue, it's another long story of these English sports of hunting local people because they were naked or half naked and they didn't wear shoes and things like this, and they many other things. Actually, the history is horrible. Now, in the past, I mentioned it about India, what the English Empire did over there. So many people were saying, "Hey, you're anti-green color or anti-blue color." So now I'm pointing it out what was going on in Ireland. I mean, this is nothing to do with being anti-green or anti-blue. I'm just talking about history. Well, anyway, let's continue. Now, here is something interesting.
Oh, here we go. Some of the evicted Irish tenant farmers with no place to go and little to eat try to shelter their families by living in holes dug in the Irish bog.
Yes, so everywhere where people used to live, yes, there was a toilet, you know, where you're having a shit and everybody has a piss. In them days, we didn't have modern toilets 100 years ago.